Okay, so you brought some really interesting stuff to the table today about these new AI models that Meta is releasing.
Yeah, the Llama 4 family. Some pretty cutting-edge stuff coming out of their AI labs.
We've got, let's see, we've got articles from Meta themselves, right from their AI blog, and then an article from NDTV,
hmm
and then kind of a hands-on review, video review from AI Code King. So it's like we have all these different angles to see what's going on.
Right, we've got the official word from Meta, some news coverage, and then somebody who's actually
Yeah.
taking it for a test drive.
Exactly. So what we want to do in this deep dive is unpack these Llama 4 models, Scout, Maverick, and Behemoth, which, I mean, just the name itself sounds impressive. We're going to look at what they are, how they work, and what people are saying about them, especially in these early days. So it seems like Meta went all in with this announcement. Even Zuckerberg himself got involved.
Yeah, that's right. The NDTV article mentioned that he announced it through an Instagram video, laid out Meta's vision for the future of AI. They're not just building it, they're open sourcing it.
Really pushing that open source aspect.
Yeah.
Interesting. So two of these models are ready to go, right? Scout and Maverick. People can download them, play around with them. I think they're on the Llama website and Hugging Face.
Yeah, that's right. The
Yeah.
Llama website and Hugging Face. And they're actually powering Meta AI, which is
Yeah.
Meta's own AI assistant.
So it's not just some research project?
No, it's being integrated into WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger. I mean, we're talking about potentially millions, billions of people interacting with these models.
And then there's Behemoth. Just like the name suggests, this is a massive model. They say it's one of their most intelligent and powerful LLMs to date.
Yeah.
But it's still under development, right?
Right, and not available for public use or download. AI Code King in their videos seemed a little bit bummed about that.
Yeah.
Like, it's in the blog post, it's being talked about, but you can't play with it.
Right.
It's like, seeing a picture of a delicious cake but not being able to have a slice.
Okay, so let's start with the models we can actually get our hands on. Let's start with Scout. What are we looking at here in terms of the nuts and bolts, the architecture, and how big it is, all of that?
So Scout has a total of 109 billion parameters.
Wow.
But here's the catch. Only 17 billion of those are active at any given time.
Okay.
And this is where the mixture of experts, or MOE architecture, comes in. They're using 16 expert models, right? Think of it like a team of specialists. You don't need all of them for every task, just the ones that are relevant.
Right, so it's not like you're firing up all 109 billion parameters all the time. Makes it more efficient, I imagine.
Exactly. Like AI Code King mentioned, this MOE setup groups similar types of data together. So each expert gets really, really good at a specific task, whether it's math or coding or whatever it might be.
And then there's the context window, right? 10 million tokens, they're saying it's industry leading.
That's a lot of tokens.
But what does that actually mean, for someone who isn't steeped in all this technical jargon?
Think of it like the AI's short-term memory. The larger the window, the more it can remember. So we're talking about being able to summarize long documents, have really nuanced conversations, maybe even understand entire code bases.
Wow.
Like imagine being able to ask it to find all the bugs in a million lines of code.
That's pretty impressive. And apparently you can run this thing on a single GPU, a single NVIDIA H100. They're using something called Infor quantization. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's a way to make the model more memory efficient. Essentially, you're representing the data using fewer bits. You might lose a little bit of precision, but it makes the model run much faster.
So it's like a trade-off.
Right, but it makes it more accessible. You don't need a supercomputer to run this thing.
Right.
And, like we said, it's available on the Llama website, Hugging Face. AI Code King confirmed that. It's also the foundation for Meta AI, their own AI assistant.
Okay.
So, they're really putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. So let's talk performance. This is where things get a little bit interesting, I think, based on the sources you've brought. AI Code King seemed to think that Scout was, performing about the same as Google's Llama 3, which is a much smaller model.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a head scratcher. But it shows that size isn't everything, right? It could be the architecture, the training data. But then, Meta's own blog, they're saying Scout is beating Gemma 3 and Gemini 2.0 Flashlight and Mistral 3.1. So who do you believe?
We've got a little controversy brewing already. What about multimodality? Can it handle different types of data, images, text, that sort of thing?
Meta's saying it's the best multimodal model in its class. They're really highlighting image grounding, which means it can link prompts to specific areas in an image.
So it's not just seeing the whole image, it's understanding the different parts of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
But AI Code King, well, they did some demos, and let's just say the results were mixed.
Mixed.
Well, they tried to make an exploding confetti button, and that worked, which is good. But then they tried to generate a playable synth keyboard, and it was atrocious is the word they used. Didn't work at all.
Okay, that's not great.
And then they tried to generate a butterfly SVG, and that was also a disaster. They said even smaller models can do better.
Oof.
And the spinning hexagon demo, that didn't work either. It just kind of slid off the screen instead of rotating. And then the game of life, which is a pretty standard test, didn't work at all for Scout. It did work for Maverick, which we'll talk about later.
So Meta says it's the best, but these demos, not so much.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You got these benchmark scores, which are great, but then real-world performance can be a different story.
All right, let's move on to Maverick. Tell me about this one. What's it like under the hood?
Maverick is also using the mixture of experts architecture. It has the same 17 billion active parameters as Scout,
Okay.
but it's got a total of 400 billion parameters and 128 experts. So it's a much bigger model. And Meta is saying this MOE approach makes training more cost-effective, and it's more efficient when you're actually using the model.
Makes sense. You're not using all of it all the time. They're calling this one a workhorse, more of a general purpose model.
Right. Chat, reasoning, digital tasks. And like Scout, it's available on llama.com and Hugging Face, and it's part of the Meta AI platform.
Okay, so what about performance? Are we seeing the same kind of discrepancies between Meta's claims and the video review?
Pretty much. Meta's saying Maverick is beating GPT-4o and Gemini 2.0 Flash and all sorts of tests. Code generation, reasoning, multilingual understanding, image analysis, long text sequences. They're even saying it rivals DeepSeek v3.1 in coding and logic, which is interesting because DeepSeek is a much bigger model.
Those are some bold claims. What did AI Code King think?
Well, they said it was about the same as 2.0 Flash and GPT-4, which is still good, but not quite what Meta's claiming. And the coding demos, those were still pretty rough.
Same problems.
Pretty much. The playable synth keyboard and the butterfly SVG, still atrocious, still not working. The spinning hexagon, same issue. But the game of life did work this time.
At least that's something.
Yeah.
What about reasoning? AI Code King mentioned it, showing some potential there.
Yeah, they said it passed a question that most non-reasoning models fail, which is a good find. But then it struggled with more complex reasoning and pattern recognition questions.
So baby steps.
Right.
Meta's also talking about Maverick being really good at understanding both images and text.
Yeah, they're saying it's a leader in multimodal performance, even beating GPT-4o and Gemini 2.0 Flash in their benchmarks. But again, that doesn't really line up with what we saw in the video.
So there seems to be a theme here. Meta's making big claims, but the real-world performance, at least in this initial review, isn't quite living up to the hype, especially when it comes to these multimodal tasks. All right, let's touch on Behemoth again, just briefly. What do we know about this behemoth of a model?
Behemoth is on another level entirely. It's got around 2 trillion total parameters, with 288 billion active and 16 experts. Both NDTV and Meta's blog are saying it's one of the smartest and most powerful models Meta's ever built.
2 trillion parameters. That's just mind-boggling. And its main purpose right now is to train the other models, right?
That's right. They're calling it a teacher model. It's helped to train both Scout and Maverick. And they're saying that the knowledge transfer from Behemoth led to some big improvements.
Okay, so it's like the brains behind the operation, even if we can't interact with it directly.
Exactly.
Now let's get a little bit more technical. We've talked about MOE and multimodality, but what else is interesting about how these Llama 4 models are built?
Well, the mixture of experts architecture, that's really key to understanding how they can be so efficient. They've got all these specialized components or experts, and only the relevant ones are activated for each task.
Right, so it's like having a team of specialists, but you're only paying for the ones you need.
Exactly. Saves on computing power, it makes the whole thing more manageable. And then there's native multimodality.
Which is different from how other models handle different types of data. How so?
Right. Meta's saying that with Llama 4, they're using early fusion. So text and visual data are combined right at the beginning. It's all processed together rather than separately. And they've also got a new vision encoder based on MetaClip, which is supposed to improve the visual understanding.
Interesting.
They're really pushing this idea that text and images should be understood together rather than as separate things. And then there's Scout's massive context window, 10 million tokens.
How did they pull that off?
Well, they did a lot of pre-training with a really long context length, 256,000 tokens. And then they've got this new architecture called IRO-PE, which is designed to help the model understand the order and relationships between words and concepts, even in really, really long texts.
So it can keep track of things even when the text is incredibly long?
Exactly.
And the training data, that's got to be massive.
Huge. Over 30 trillion tokens. That's more than double what they use for Llama 3. And they've got 10 times more data in languages other than English, so they're really focusing on making these models multilingual.
30 trillion tokens. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
So with all these advancements, what's the big takeaway? Why should people care about these Llama 4 models?
Well, from Meta's perspective, it's about democratizing AI, making these powerful tools available to everyone. They're open sourcing them, so developers, researchers, anyone can use them, build on them, make new things.
That's a pretty powerful statement.
It is.
Yeah.
They're saying they want everyone to be able to contribute to the future of AI, and they're also putting their money where their mouth is, integrating these models into their own products like Meta AI.
Right.
And then there's the API access, which is free on platforms like OpenRouter. So it's not just about the models themselves, it's about making them accessible, lowering the barrier to entry.
And NDTV mentioned Meta's investment in AI infrastructure. They're clearly serious about this. Absolutely. And they're also talking about safety and reliability. They're saying that Llama 4 is better than Llama 3 at handling sensitive topics, reducing unwarranted refusals, that sort of thing.
So it's not just about making these models powerful, it's about making them responsible as well.
Right, which is really important as these things become more and more integrated into our lives.
Okay, so to sum up, we've got Scout and Maverick, both using mixture of experts, both multimodal, Scout with this huge context window. Meta saying they're amazing. AI Code King had some issues, especially with the multimodal stuff. And then there's Behemoth, the teacher model, still in development, but super powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that AI is moving really fast. These initial reviews, they're just a snapshot. We'll have to see how these models perform in the wild as more people start using them.
Absolutely. So with all that in mind, what do you think? What possibilities do these Llama 4 models open up for you? Go check them out on Hugging Face or play around with the APIs, see what you can do.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to learn, to really get a feel for what these models are capable of.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.